The most devastating weapon you possess makes no sound. It leaves no trace, and yet it can destroy a man more surely than a blade plunged into his heart. This weapon is your silence, your absence, your gaze that passes through someone as if they did not exist. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago, and what he discovered about the power of strategic indifference is so dangerous that this knowledge was buried, diluted, deliberately forgotten. What I will reveal to you at the end of this video, the 7th principle, the one no one dares teach, has the power to reverse any power dynamic in your favor, in seconds, without uttering a single word. But before we get there, you must understand why ignoring someone is not simply a passive act. It is a silent declaration of war. It is the purest form of power. If you are among those who refuse to be manipulated, if you seek to understand the invisible mechanisms that govern human relationships, then stay until the very last. Second, subscribe now, because what you are about to discover here cannot be found anywhere else. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt the icy void of being ignored by someone who mattered to you? Florence, 1513. In a damp cell, a man broken by torture writes words that will transcend centuries. Niccolo Machiavelli, former advisor to the powerful, pens The Prince. But what few people know is that his most famous work was merely the visible surface of a far darker knowledge. In his private correspondences, never published during his lifetime, Machiavelli explored a form of power that even tyrants feared to use. He called it calculated contempt, the art of reducing an adversary to nothing, not through violence, but through the total absence of recognition. The Greek Stoics, long before him, had understood that indifference was the supreme form of inner freedom. Epictetus taught that what destroys us is never the act itself, but the importance we grant it. Marcus. Aurelius practiced detachment as an emperor practices the sword, but Machiavelli transformed this defensive wisdom into an offensive weapon. And this knowledge was deliberately obscured because it threatens the social order itself. What you are about to discover will now call into question everything you thought you knew about power and human relationships. First principle, the invisible wound that never heals. There exists a pain that modern science is only beginning to understand. Neuroscientists at the University of California made a disturbing discovery in 2003. When a person is ignored or socially excluded, their brain activates exactly the same regions as during intense physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, that region which lights up when you burn yourself or break a bone, reacts identically when someone refuses to acknowledge your existence. Understand clearly what this means. When you ignore someone deliberately and strategically, you inflict upon them a suffering that their brain cannot distinguish from a physical wound. Except this wound leaves no mark. No one can see it. No one can prove it. And yet, it gnaws at the mind from within. Machiavelli had intuitively grasped what science would confirm 5 centuries later. In his writings, he observes that princes who ignored their enemies destroyed them more effectively than those who fought them openly. Why? Because the enemy who is fought retains his dignity. He can fight back. He can die with honor. But the enemy who is ignored consumes himself in doubt and impotent rage. You perhaps recognize yourself in what I'm describing. How many times have you felt that inner burning when someone you respected treated you as if you did not exist? How many nights have you spent wondering what you did wrong when the answer was terrifyingly simple? Nothing. You had done nothing. That was precisely the point. But this is not the most important part, for there exists a mechanism even more profound. Second principle, the void that drains vital energy. Psychologists call it ostracism, but this clinical word does not capture the horror of what actually happens in the mind of the one who is ignored. Let me describe the process to you. When you are ignored by someone who matters to you, your brain enters a state of primitive alert. You begin desperately searching for explanations. You analyze every past interaction. You dissect every word, every gesture, every silence. This rumination consumes a massive amount of mental energy. You become obsessed with a person who, themselves, may not even be thinking of you. This is where the cruel genius of this technique lies. The one who ignores expends zero energy. The one who is ignored expends all their energy. The imbalance is total. Victory is secured before the battle even begins. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince must conserve his resources while exhausting those of his adversaries. Strategic indifference accomplishes this perfectly. You do nothing, and yet you dominate. You remain still, and yet you conquer. But wait, because what you are about to hear now changes everything. Third principle, the collapse of identity. We exist through the gaze of others. This philosophical truth, formulated by Sartre and Hegel, has profound psychological implications. Our sense of self, our identity, our self-worth, all of this is largely constructed through the recognition others grant us. When you refuse to recognize someone, you are not simply withdrawing your attention. You are withdrawing a part of their very existence. You create an ontological void, a hole in the fabric of their reality, and this void is unbearable for the human mind. Prisoners in solitary confinement develop psychotic disorders within weeks, not because of physical pain, but because of the absence of human recognition. The human brain is simply not designed to exist without being seen, without being recognized, without being validated by other consciousnesses. When you master the art of ignoring, you hold this terrible power. You can make someone's very identity waver. You can make them doubt their own worth, their own reality, their own right to exist. I know what you are thinking right now. You are telling yourself this is cruel, that it is manipulative, and you are right. But here is the truth that well-intentioned people refuse to admit. This power exists. It is being used against you right now by people who do not deserve to wield it. The question is not whether this power should exist. It exists. The question is whether you will understand it well enough to protect yourself from it, or to use it when your survival demands it. If you are still here, it is because you are not like the others. Most people would have already fled, unable to bear these uncomfortable truths. But you seek to understand. And it is precisely for minds like yours that I create this content. If this video brings you value, if it opens your eyes to realities you vaguely sensed, then I ask only one thing in return. Press the like button. This is not for me. It is a signal between us. A silent pact among those who dare to see the world as it truly is. Fourth principle, the invisible hierarchy of attention. Remember this well because it will make complete sense later. In every human interaction, there exists an invisible hierarchy. The one who looks and the one who is looked at. The one who waits for attention and the one who dispenses it. The one who needs and the one who fulfills that need. Machiavelli had observed this in the Italian courts of the Renaissance. The prince who chased after approval from his courtiers instantly lost his authority. The prince who sparingly granted his attention saw courtiers fighting to obtain a mere glance. This dynamic has not changed. It is hardwired into our biology. We are hierarchical social animals, and the distribution of attention is one of the most powerful markers of status. When you ignore someone, you unconsciously communicate that you are above them in the hierarchy, that your attention is precious, rare, and that they have not earned this privilege. This message is received by the other person's primitive brain, even if their rational brain refuses to admit it. Conversely, when you chase after someone's attention, when you respond immediately to their messages, when you laugh at their mediocre jokes, when you accept their scraps of interest, you communicate your inferior position. You submit without even realizing it. But there is a trap that no one talks about. And this trap I will reveal to you in the next part. But before that, you must understand an even deeper concept. We are now entering the part that only hungry minds reach. What follows is not for the weak. Fifth principle, the paradox of reaction. Here is what Machiavelli discovered and what masters of manipulation have used for centuries. Any reaction you give to someone, whether positive or negative, grants them power over you. Anger is a form of attention. Hatred is a form of recognition. Even your most elaborate revenge is an involuntary tribute to the importance that person holds in your life. Manipulators know this instinctively. This is why they provoke. This is why they test your limits. This is why they do things that seem designed to infuriate you. Every time you react, you confirm that they have the power to make you react. You give them exactly what they seek, proof of their importance in your mental universe. Indifference breaks this cycle. It is the only response that does not feed the manipulator's game. It is the only silence that speaks louder than all screams. You may be telling yourself that it is different for you, that the person who makes you suffer deserves your anger, that not reacting would be a sign of weakness. But I am going to ask you a question that may disturb you. Who is truly the slave in this situation? The one who acts without caring about your reaction, or the one who reacts without being able to help it? True power is not in the ability to strike. It is in the ability to remain unaffected. Sixth principle, erosion through absence. What follows changes everything in your understanding of power dynamics. There exists a psychological phenomenon that researchers call extinction. When a behavior is no longer rewarded by any reaction, it eventually disappears. This is a basic principle of conditioning, discovered by Pavlov and developed by Skinner. Applied to human relationships, this means something profound. When you completely cease reacting to someone, when you deprive them of any form of feedback, their behavior toward you begins to extinguish. Not because they decided to change, but because their brain, receiving no more stimulation, gradually stops considering this relationship as relevant. This is how you can literally erase someone from your reality and, conversely, erase yourself from theirs, not through a dramatic act, but through the silent accumulation of non-responses, absences, voids. Machiavelli advised princes never to publicly banish their enemies, for banishment grants importance. It creates martyrs. It fuels legends. True erasure happens in the shadows, through progressive forgetting, through growing insignificance. I will return to this crucial point in a moment, but first, you must understand the deadly trap that awaits those who use this technique without understanding its rules. The trap of poorly mastered indifference. Listen carefully, because this mistake destroys more people than it helps. Strategic indifference is not the same thing as emotional indifference. The first is a conscious choice, a deliberate tactic. The second is a wound, an armor forged in pain. Many people, wounded by life, develop a defensive indifference. They numb themselves. They cut themselves off from their emotions. They believe that feeling nothing protects them. But this kind of indifference is not power. It is a prison. It isolates them from all authentic connection. It transforms them into spectators of their own lives. The true art lies in the ability to feel deeply while consciously choosing not to react. This is the difference between the Stoic and the sociopath. The Stoic feels the pain, but does not allow it to dictate his actions. The sociopath feels nothing and ends up isolated in an emotional desert of his own creation. You are now part of the restricted circle of those who understand this crucial distinction. Anticipate this. You might be telling yourself that you are already too sensitive, too reactive, that indifference is not in your nature. But that is precisely why you need this knowledge. The most sensitive are the most vulnerable to manipulation. And they are also those who, once armed with this understanding, become the most formidable. Calculated indifference facing different types of people. Not all adversaries deserve the same form of indifference. Machiavelli distinguished several categories of enemies, and each requires a different approach. Facing the narcissist, indifference is a nuclear weapon. The narcissist feeds on attention like a vampire feeds on blood. Any attention, even negative, sustains them. But indifference drains them of their substance. It shows them their insignificance, and nothing terrifies the narcissist more than their own insignificance. Facing the passive-aggressive manipulator, indifference breaks their game. They seek to provoke without appearing to wound while maintaining a facade of innocence. When you refuse to take the bait, when you give them no reaction to interpret, they lose all power. Facing the envious, indifference is the sweetest revenge. The envious person suffers from your success. They secretly hope for your downfall. When you ignore them completely, when you continue to prosper without even granting them a glance, their suffering intensifies without you having to lift a finger. But prepare yourself, because the next point goes even deeper. Are you truly ready to hear what follows? For what I have saved for the end, this seventh principle, is the one no one dares to formulate. It is so powerful that it could change all of your relationships within days. But it comes with a price. Before I reveal it to you, I ask you this. If this video has already transformed your understanding of power and human relationships, subscribe now and activate the bell. What is coming is too important to miss, and the next video will go even further into these depths. The seventh principle, indifference as a mirror of truth. Here is the final revelation. the one that 99% of people are not ready to hear. The indifference you feel toward others, or that they feel toward you, is always a mirror. It reveals the truth of relationships that words and polite gestures conceal. When someone truly ignores you without games or manipulation, they have simply shown you your real place in their life. Not the place you imagined, not the place you deserved, the real place. And this truth, as painful as it may be, is a gift, because it frees you from illusion. Conversely, your own ability to ignore someone reveals you to yourself. If you cannot ignore a person who harms you, it is not out of nobility of soul, it is out of dependency. It is out of need, it is out of weakness. Strategic indifference then becomes a tool for personal diagnosis. It shows you where your invisible chains are located. Machiavelli, in his final years, had understood that ultimate power was not in dominating others, but in dominating oneself. Mastered indifference is not a weapon against others. It is a weapon against your own weaknesses, your own dependencies, your own illusions. The true master does not use indifference to destroy his enemies. He uses it to free himself from his need to have enemies. He uses it to reach that inner sovereignty that the Stoics called ataraxia, imperturbability in the face of the world's storms. These principles are worthless if they remain abstract concepts. Here is how to embody them in your daily life. Technique 1. The 24-hour rule. When someone does or says something that provokes you, irritates you, hurts you, impose upon yourself a 24-hour delay before any reaction, not to prepare your revenge, but to let the emotion dissipate. You will discover that in the majority of cases after this delay, the reaction will seem unnecessary. The fire will have extinguished itself, and you will have saved precious energy. Technique 2. The reaction inventory. For 1 week, keep a journal of all your emotional reactions to others. Note who made you react, how, and why. At the end of the week, analyze this journal. You will discover patterns, people who systematically trigger your reactions, situations that make you lose your power. This awareness is the first step toward mastery. Technique 3. The practice of the passing gaze. Train yourself to look through people rather than at them, not with hostility or displayed contempt, but with total neutrality, as if your gaze were resting on an unimportant object. This technique requires practice, but it becomes natural over time. It allows you to communicate indifference without saying a word, without creating open conflict. Technique 4. Strategic silence in conversations. Learn to use pauses and silences as tools of power. When someone says something hostile or provocative, do not respond immediately. Let a silence settle. Look at them calmly, then change the subject or walk away. This non-engagement is more devastating than any witty comeback. Technique 5. Progressive disappearance. If you must detach from someone who harms you, do not do it abruptly. Sudden breakage creates drama, attention, conflicts. Instead, progressively reduce your availability. Respond less and less quickly. Be less and less present. Let the relationship die of starvation rather than assassinating it. It is slower, but infinitely more effective and less emotionally costly. Technique 6. Immunization through exposure. Voluntarily expose yourself to small doses of rejection and indifference. Train yourself to be ignored without it affecting you. Talk to strangers who may not respond. Express opinions that may be ignored. Each time you survive indifference, you strengthen your immunity. You progressively become impregnable. Technique 7. The observer meditation. Each morning, take 5 minutes to visualize your day ahead as an external observer. Imagine yourself moving through potentially difficult interactions with perfect serenity, without reaction, without disturbance. This mental programming prepares your brain to remain in this state of calm detachment when real situations present themselves. These techniques applied with consistency will radically transform your relationship to power and to others. But remember the fundamental distinction. You are not becoming insensitive. You are becoming sovereign over your own reactions. You feel, but you choose. You observe, but you are no longer swept away. We have traveled together into the depths of knowledge that few dare to explore. You have discovered why indifference is the ultimate weapon of silent power. You have understood how it wounds more deeply than any violence. You have seen how it reveals invisible hierarchies, and how it can be used to free you from your own chains. But remember the question I asked at the beginning. Have you ever felt the icy void of being ignored by someone who mattered to you? Now you understand what was really happening, and above all, you understand that you are no longer obligated to be the victim of this dynamic. You are no longer the same person you were at the start of this video. You have seen behind the curtain. You have access to knowledge that most people flee because it confronts them with uncomfortable truths about human nature and about their own vulnerability. The question that remains is this: what will you do with this power? Will you use it to dominate others as master manipulators would? Or will you use it to free yourself, to reach that inner sovereignty that makes you impregnable? The choice is yours, but know that the mere awareness of these mechanisms already places you above those who suffer them without understanding. If you were among the rare few to stay until the end, you now belong to the community of lucid minds, those who dare to see, those who refuse comfortable illusions, those who seek true power, the kind that depends on no one. Press like if this video changed something in you. Subscribe if you want to go further in this exploration of the depths of human psychology. Share this video with someone who needs it, someone who may be suffering right now from another's indifference, without understanding what is at play. And leave me a comment. Which principle struck you the most? Which aspect of indifference will you begin to master first? Next week, I reveal something no one dares to address: the hidden signs that show someone is manipulating your need for approval. This video will be even deeper, even more disturbing. Remember this: the one who masters the art of ignoring does not control others. He frees himself from the need to control them. And that is where true power lies. Silence is the supreme form of speech, absence, the supreme form of presence, and indifference, the supreme form of power. Now, you know.